Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Tricky Thursday of this month in association with Urban Circle. I'm Amira Salim, the nursery manager of Jumeirah International Nurseries in our branch located in Mirdif. And we're coming today to speak about screen time management. And I think it's a very important topic nowadays. And all of us as parents, myself as a mom, I'm coming here to ask questions and to hear all their address my children. Especially that we all know technology has been increasingly paving its way to our lives by making it, I would say, easier, faster, or maybe even more fun, especially for our children. So the first word comes to my mind when we talk about screen time management will be moderation, or maybe with some tips on how to set rules and routines in our families so we can always manage children's expectations, especially when it comes to watching like during meal times or driving, things like that. So today we have a very special guest indeed joining us to discuss strategies to help you manage your child's screen time and of course answer all of your tricky questions that I have a lot of them myself as a mother. So please join me to welcome Mrs. Pamela Durant. Hi Pamela, good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Jumeirah International Nurseries, and also Urban Circle that has helped organize this. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Okay, shall we start with the presentation? Just for our audience to know, Pamela will start with her presentation, talk about it. In her presentation, she has answered most of your questions, but we still have at the end of the session a Q&A time where we still gonna repeat all the questions again and make sure that we focus on each question raised by all our parents. And please drop any more questions if you like, and we will make sure to answer them as much as we can before the end of our time. Yes, Pamela?
Sure, thank you. And welcome to today's discussion of strategies to help you manage your child's screen time. I also have a child, he's now 14, so managing screen time, he is of the generation that screens were starting to come into his life when he was about the age of a lot of your children. So it has always been a challenge, but there are some things that we can do to help them manage it and learn healthy habits around it. So shall we proceed? Next screen, please. And again, thank you, Urban Circle, for organizing this with JINS. Urban Circle is a responsive online platform for connecting families with qualified and verified service providers. And I've actually used some of the service providers for my own son for his activities, and they've all been amazing. So it takes a lot of the guesswork out of having to figure out which after-school activity is better or of a high quality. It's a really great platform. Next screen. And just a closer look at what they have. Things are divided into categories. It's super easy to find what you're looking for. Everything from childcare, tutoring, sports, other after-school activities, health and wellness, which I'm happy to be a part of that category. And also even birthday parties. They have 180 partner companies and they are continuously growing. Next slide, please. And a little bit more about me. I've lived in Dubai for about 20 years. I am a certified wellness coach from USA-based Well Coaches, who is also an affiliate with the Institute of Coaching. The Institute of Coaching is an affiliate of Harvard Medical School. I'm also certified in lifestyle medicine, which is all about healthy habits and how that affects our health and our outcomes. I'm a certified mindful eating facilitator. And I'm also the founder and managing director of a company called DiaPoint, which focuses on health and wellness and supporting people with diabetes. Before I left the corporate world in 2016 to help people with diabetes after my experience when my son was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, the autoimmune condition, at just 20 months old, I actually worked as a healthcare consultant in a technology company. So I've been around technology all of my professional life, and also a lot of what I do now is online while focusing on healthy habits. Next slide, please. And just a little bit more about me, if you'd like to know, I do think that living with intention, feeling healthy and energized is not easy. And especially when we want to translate that or transmit that to our children. First, we need to take care of ourselves, but also we need to be mindful of all of these things when we're raising our children, and especially in this high-tech world that they're growing up in today. Next slide. So today we're going to cover tips to help you manage your child's screen time, what the experts are saying about screen time, and some suggestions to help you and your family build a personalized plan for healthy screen time. So most of your children, if you're going to JINS, they're from Generation Alpha. Today's nursery children have been born since around the year 2010, and they're children of millennials. They're the first generation who will be entirely born and growing up and shaped by the 21st century. Like I said, my son was younger when screens were just kind of coming into the life and education of children, or for gaming and other things. I mean, there were video games, but nothing like what your children are seeing now. Things are much more advanced. Your kids are logged in, they're linked up, they're digital natives, and they're super tech savvy. And that provides them with a lot of great things, but it can also be a little bit challenging when it comes to boundaries and screen addiction and how we find a good balance for them as parents. Next slide, please. So who is this discussion for today? If you're a parent and you're concerned that your kids have too much screen time, or maybe you're a parent that wants to guide and mentor your child to have a good balance with the technology in their lives. Maybe you're struggling to stick to regular boundaries or routines with the screens. And maybe you just find all the information overwhelming and you're not really sure where to begin. And I hope that if that's the case, that you do find a starting point with some of the information that we're going to talk about today. Our ultimate goal, I think, of everyone that is here, screen time, how much, how you manage it, the boundaries you set, is really to raise a child that is happy, healthy, and will realize their fullest potential in life and joyfully. It's not about the screen time or the lack of screen time. It's about raising a healthy, well-rounded child at the end of the day. Next slide, please. Thank you. So not all screen time is created equal. Before we start and talk about setting boundaries, I think it's pretty obvious that we know there is entertainment and there's education. Sometimes those two words are combined as edutainment, and that's okay too, but there's a big difference between watching TV, playing a video game, or researching something for school, a school report, or learning something new, or maybe learning math by application. It's very different than doing an app that's like mindless and not really adding any value. So it's up to us as parents to decide how and how often our kids use a screen and what they're using it for. For kids of all ages, screen time should not replace time for sleeping, eating, playing, studying off of a screen, like with books, reading books, or interacting with family and friends. That's where it starts to get really tricky. Next slide, please. And if screens are always around, then why is this so important? So the foundation of what I am certified and educated in as a health and lifestyle medicine coach looks at health holistically. Screen time affects every single one of these areas in your life and in your child's life. It affects healthy eating. It affects physical activity. It affects stress levels. It affects relationships. It definitely affects sleeps and substances as well, or we can look at screens as a potential addictive. It's not a substance, but it can be potentially addictive. Having said that, things on the screen can also enhance. There's a lot of great health apps and physical activity exercise apps. So not all of it is bad, but we need to know how to set up those boundaries and our life to make sure that the screen is enhancing it and not harming any of these areas. So how can you help your child manage screen time? Some red flags might be if your child is on the screen unsupervised. That will happen to some extent, but I'm talking like all the time, all day unsupervised. Your child maybe isn't exposed to other activities that don't involve a screen. or if your child is more interested in the screen than activities that they once used to enjoy. If you notice changes in your child's behavior after screen time, some children can become maybe a little aggressive, or some even violent, or behaviors might change. Or if your child is using a device up until the very minute that they go to bed, these are red flags that you want to look out for. Give yourself a gold star if you are familiar with the programming that your child is using and you understand that it's age appropriate for them. Talk to your child about what they're seeing or what they're playing, what they're doing on the screen. Point out good behavior like cooperation, friendship, and concern for others, and make connections meaningful. Anything on the screen can be about any of these. And even if it's just you come up and say, hey, tell me about the game that you're working on. You don't have to ask all the questions. Just ask a probing question. Tell me about the game that you're playing. And I'm sure that they'll be more than happy to share that with you. Be aware of advertising and how it influences choices. That's really tricky, especially if your child's watching things on YouTube. We know there's a lot of YouTube advertising, and while YouTube has some constraints, and when you put a video up, you need to mention, is it child friendly? Is it not child friendly? Is it explicit? Things still pop up that your child may or may not see that might influence the direction that they're going with their online consumption. Encourage your child to learn other activities such as sports, music, arts, or other hobbies that don't involve a screen. Other red flags, maybe we as adults don't have good screen habits. If we're always constantly walking around with our phone and looking at it, our child sees that. Our children model our behaviors. If your child is not aware of appropriate safety and security when using screens, that's a red flag. And of course, these need to be age appropriate. We're not going to explain to a 3-year-old, about sexual perpetrators, for example, that, might be lurking in the deepest, darkest shadows of an internet. But what is age appropriate about security, sharing names, passwords or different things like this, addresses, etc., needs to be age appropriate. If your child is not using a device in an educational or creative way, that's not to say that 100% of your screen time is always going to be educational and always going to be taking them to the next level of education. But we would prefer that most of the screen time be as educational or as helpful and constructive as possible. And if you don't have a family plan or clear guidelines and boundaries of how to use the screen at home, this can be another potential red flag. And that last one can make things really difficult if you don't have it. Give yourself a gold star if you're setting a good example with your own safe and healthy screen habits. For example, maybe during dinner, you don't have your phone with you, you don't have a device with you. Teach your children about online privacy and safety, again, within the context of the appropriate age groups. Actively decide when your child is ready for a personal device. No two children are alike. And I'm sure that some of your children may have already come to you and said, oh, my friend has a phone already. When can I get one? That does happen. And you know your child best, and you don't have to give into it because it seems to your child that it's happening to everybody else. Encourage using screens in ways that build creativity and connection with family and friends. And it's, perfectly okay, just as we're having this conversation online, this is a very constructive way to use the screen. Consider your child, or if you have a teen, as they grow older, consider their maturity and habits. Again, not every child is the same. They may be ready for some things before others. It just really depends on you and your family and your children. The right plan for one family is not necessarily the best fit for another one. So, how much is too much? This is a big question that many people have, and it's one that I know that every parent struggles with these days. So, according to psychologists and pediatricians, until 18 months of age, limit screen time as much as possible, with the exception of video chatting with maybe family or adults. And it's a way of communication. Just as when children were very small before screens, we would put them on the phone to say hello or whatever few words they could say. Try to avoid screens until that time. Between 18 and 24 months, screen time can be limited to watching educational programming with a caregiver. And by caregiver, that means like you're engaged with the content that they're watching. You're aware of what they're watching. You're talking about it with them, or they're teaching something from them. And sometimes at 18 and 24 months, they'll be, for example, maybe it's a video that they love so much and they'll want to watch it again and again. And you don't have to necessarily sit there as engaged as you were with them the first time because you know what's coming up. But it should have a caregiver overseeing it. For children aged 2 to 5, limit non-educational screen time to about 1 hour per weekday and 3 hours on the weekend days. That's just a rough guideline. Like I said, you may find that maybe you prefer less, and that's okay too. Maybe if you go over the 3 hours on the weekends, that's okay as well. But, we don't want to see 10, 12 hours. Sometimes some weekends are different. It may have more screen time or less. For ages 6 and older, encourage healthy habits and limit activities that include screens. By the time that they're 6, you can have more of a conversation with them about what is healthy and what's not healthy. Talking to a 6-year-old about screen time versus a 4-year-old is a very different conversation. 6-year-old can start to understand the boundaries and be involved in the decision-making. Turn off all screens during family meals and outings as much as possible. I know this is a difficult one, but this is one of probably the most important ones that you can start doing from the very beginning as soon as possible. Learn how to use parental controls on the devices. There's parental controls that you can set blocking certain videos if they're watching YouTube, or certain apps have them. Even our telephones have them where you can block certain apps. Some are password protected. There's a myriad of parental controls that you can tap into to limit your child's screen time. Avoid using screens as pacifiers, babysitters, or to stop tantrums, because this then only encourages more screen time, because then it becomes soothing for them. And we want to teach children to be able to soothe themselves in other ways. Turn off screens and remove them from the bedroom at least 30 to 60 minutes before bedtime. Because if we don't, and I'm sure we've all heard of it, this whole blue light effect and what that does to our brains, it keeps us awake and we don't get good sleep. And as adults, we should even be mindful of that for ourselves as well. If we're looking at our phones or our computers until the end of the day, then our brains are racing. And we're probably still thinking about work as we sleep and all the other things that we have to do because we've been consuming information. Or we'll be upset and angry about some posts that we saw on social media as adults. So children are no different. What they see is going to be registered into their brain before they sleep. They'll see it in their dreams and they'll go to bed with it. So they need to decompress before they go to sleep. Next slide. So as I mentioned, having a family screen time plan is a really great idea. And you may wish to write it down, or you may wish to verbally talk about it. There's a lot of different ways you can do that, but these are some areas that you can talk to your children about and set boundaries around them. So maybe in your house, you want to have a screen-free zone. For example, the dinner table. There are no screens, that nobody is going to bring a screen to the dinner table. Or maybe it's a certain family room where you all sit and talk and congregate and sit together. Identify screen-free times. Maybe there's certain times of day. Hey, when you first get up in the morning, don't reach for the screen. Let's come downstairs, let's sit, let's talk first. So from 9 a.m. until maybe noon on the weekend, we're not going to have any screens. And then screens can be okay from noon until 2 p.m. or something like this. Whatever works for your family. Maybe the screen time is in the morning and then in the afternoon is family time. Give device curfews. This will help your children get off of them before bed. Like, hey, after 7 o'clock or after 5 o'clock, no more screens. Diversify the media. Shouldn't always necessarily be an app. Screen time can include TV. It might include some apps. It might include videos. There's a lot of different things, not always the same. And this just helps create more variety. Too much of the same thing of anything, whether it's food or the same kind of screen time, can prove to be unhealthy. Co-play and co-view. As a caretaker or a parent, you want to interact with them and be in your child's world. Screens are not going to go anywhere from their world. They will be here to stay. So the more that we play with them, then the more that they will want to open up to us, talk to us about what they're doing. We'll be able to understand what they're watching, see if it's age appropriate, and learn with them as they explore this online screen world. Balance online and off time. And as I mentioned earlier, get them involved in other activities that they love, get them outside, and just find the healthy balance. What is a healthy balance? We talked about that a little bit of what's age appropriate, but it's really about what works for you and your family. Good digital citizenship. This is around safety and security and how to use the screen, or how to use the internet, how to use apps and everything properly, how to watch out for bullying, how to not be a bully, how to give, when it comes down to social media, when they start chatting. Right now, all the kids are using Discord. By the time your small children are older, it might be something else. How to give feedback, the proper language that you use when you're writing a message to somebody in a kind of a chat thing. These are all part of good digital citizenship. Good manners, also related to good digital citizenship. How to be kind. Even though the world is becoming more virtual all the time, it's still important to be kind. Cyber safety, another one. That's, again, talked about, like security. You don't want to ever give out your address online, or if you come across something and somebody asks you to send a picture of yourself and you don't know them, then don't do it. And enough sleep and exercise. And I can't express this one enough, because screens have made us more sedentary. That does make people gain weight. That can cause health issues and all kinds of problems if we're not finding the balance with them. Next slide, please. In the end, in summary, if I had one slide, well, I think everything that we're talking about with screen time is important, but the most important thing that you can do when it comes to family screen time or screen time for your children is provide guidance for them, set very clear boundaries, and stick to those boundaries and be consistent. Yes, they may not always be happy about the boundaries and rules that you set for them with screen time, but be consistent, and after a few days and a short time, they will comply. They will be on board. They will begin to understand as they get older. If you're concerned about your child's screen time, if you see that they're having aggressive behavior or behaving differently or withdrawing as a result of the screen, then reach out to your pediatrician or family physician or a psychologist if the problem persists, or talk to someone in the school. The teachers and counselors could also provide advice or who to reach out to. Thank you so much for listening to this discussion. If you are looking for support in your health and wellness, you can reach out to me anytime. Feel free to follow me on social media or drop me an email at pam@diapointme.com. I look forward to your questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Pamela. Thank you. That was very informative. I like how did you start the presentation on a very constructive way, talking about ourselves as an adults, how we look after our health and nutrition, and just playing an important role of being the role models for our children. And then moving into talking about technology and how it's invading our lives, not just as an adults, even more for our children. The different types of technology, if it's educational or just for entertainment, and how we can talk with them about it. I believe that we should, maybe not at the very early years, they won't understand it, but we control it for them. And whenever you have that chance where you can speak to your children, always make sure to tell them what's the difference and when is the right time to watch what content, like quality content. And yes, moving after that to how technology affects us physically, mentally, our sleep, vision, everything. It's important to understand, and for our children to understand, why do we say no? Sometimes they think that we just say no out of like, no, we want to just say no as mommies, but actually we have a point of view behind it. And this is really important. Like, really, if you can get the point to your child, it's really important if you go visit someone like Miss Pamela and let her speak with your child about it to convince them that it's really affecting us if we not use it in a rational way. And thank you for all the red flags and the gold star. I think I will look into that after this conversation. I need to see, okay, yes, we're doing that. No, we're not doing that. So to make sure that we are going in the right direction, even with my children. I hope all parents as well found that useful. So at least it's kind of a little guidance on our direction when it comes to screen time with children. And yes, and finally was the plan for families, the screen time plan. I'm going to talk about myself, and I think lots of us in this situation is when you start this plan and then you follow it, and the children really listens to you, and we followed for some times, but it's a very dynamic lifestyle, and then one day is different than the other, then we fail to follow this kind of boundaries that we've built and agreed on together. But it's very important that we always to refresh it, go back, sit as a family and talk about it again, and make sure that we bring it back on track, so we can always keep it in mind that this is not a very healthy lifestyle. We need to keep it, as I just said, rational and fair and equal, and give us some time to spend as a family. I like the free zone of technology, like dining tables. It's really rare nowadays that we sit all on a dining table, but yes, it is important that we make sure that this is
when we sit down, exactly. Or even if they're not eating with everyone in the family, like if I'm doing something and my son's eating, and I'll say, hey, don't bring your computer or whatever it is you're doing to the table, just eat mindfully, enjoy it, get your child involved in the food, talk about the food. And it's not about like eliminating all screen time. Like I told you just before we started, this morning I was at a presentation about the metaverse. Screens and this type of environment, it's not going to leave. And the things that our children even study in university, there'll be many different degrees and different topics and different subjects that will be science-based. They all require a screen. So it's not about forbidding your child to be on the screen. I did that when my son was really young. And then what happened was when he started early primary school, he was actually the odd person out because he could not socially interact. And at that time, there was this game, Plants vs. Zombies, on the iPad. Everybody knew about that game except my son. And he came home and he said, what is Plants vs. Zombies? And I went, oh no, I've protected him so much from the screen that he had no idea. He was watching a few things on TV, but he did not have iPad games in his life at that time. They were still very new. So everything in moderation and being mindful, and, eating is eating, sleeping is sleeping, outdoor play is outdoor play. And then screen time will just become screen time, or it's something that we use to do positive things.
100%, I agree. During my last parent-teacher conference with my daughter's teacher, I asked him this question, and he was like, okay, you send us lots of homeworks, you send us lots of these applications that the schools paid for to kind of get the children up to date with their curriculum and lessons. And he was like, listen, just focus on this and this and this, and get her out in the park to play. This is what she needs to be doing. She even if it's an educational content, yes, moderation is very important, but play as well is very important. This is what they need to learn. Okay, shall we start our questions now? Okay, so we have our first question from Mariam. Thank you, Mariam. What is the recommended screen time per week and per day?
So screen time per week, per day, if we go, I don't know if you can go back in the presentation to that one slide where we had the different age groups. If we're able to see that one.
It also differs from one
how much
age
is
to
too
another.
much.
Yes.
It does differ from one age, this one. So screen time differs from one age to another. So 18 months, limit it to just maybe a Zoom call with a loved one. Between 18 and 24 months, screen time should be limited to watching educational programming with a caregiver. And again, no more than like, a couple of hours or 1 hour or like one show, and then cut it off, and then take your child and go build a puzzle or go do something artistic or get them outside. For children 2 to 5, 1 hour per weekday and 3 hours on the weekend. For ages 6 and older, healthy habits. When my son was about 6, I was still having it like 1 to 2 hours per day on the weekend. There was no screen time that was not related to school allowed during school days. And I still live by that. He has, his computer, he has to use it for school, but there's no gaming with friends until on the weekend. So the weekdays is a time for work, play, school, and still we're playing and enjoying things on the weekend, but we're really constructive of how we do that. And as they get older, you'll find, they will want more screen time, and it's very social. And I'll give you an example. I came home, my husband and I were at a birthday dinner for a friend, and we came home and it was kind of late. It was probably 10:30, 11 o'clock. And it was a Friday or Saturday night. My son was still on the screen, chatting with friends. But as I came in and I could hear him, they were laughing, they were dancing, they had music on. And, since COVID, they did become used to interacting with each other in this way. But that was the most engaged. They play online with the friends and they chat, but this was the most engaged in like a fun, physical way that I had ever heard him online with his friends. And I decided for that particular night, I'm like, I am not going to break up this party because they were having such a good time. So there's a time and a place. But of course, these are just rough guidelines. So do what works best for you and your family and look at the guidelines. I know a psychologist who, even though her children are now grown in teens, she's still 30 minutes a week and that's it. Like she's very adamant about it. And she's, sticks to it, but that works for her and her family. It may not work for everyone else. So I hope
Yes,
that
I
answered that question.
100% agree. Yes, I agree. It differs from one family to another. So please, Mariam, look into your child's routine and how does her or his day go, and accordingly you decide. Of course, the age is an important factor as well.
And also how they behave before, after the screen too. If you see behaviors really changing, then maybe you need to really start cutting back on the screen time.
100%, yes. Okay, so our next question will be from Ghosty. What reasons can we tell my 6-year-old to turn off her iPad or the TV? For example, I say that it can cause serious eye problems. Please share any other reasonable points. Thank you. Thank you, Ghosty.
Yeah, so the reasons, again, you need to find, I think, what motivates your child is really helpful. And when you tell a small child, like, hey, it's going to hurt your eyesight, they don't have the understanding that over time that might actually happen. And for some children, that could also create a lot of fear, which you don't really want to do. When you talk about the health of screens, in a general context, then maybe that's okay. But I would look at it from different points of view. And I would also ask your child, if they're old enough to have an opinion about it, you could say, look, what do you think is a good, healthy time for the screen? And even if they're 5 years old, they might say, they're not sure, or maybe you break it down into their day. But you could cite some of the reasons that we talked about. You won't have good sleep. You won't feel as happy. You'll miss out on a lot of other fun activities like playing outside, whatever sport that they love, reading great books, interacting with friends, and doing all of these other really fun things. Then when it comes time to turn it off, don't just tell your child to turn it off, because I don't think most children will ever do that, especially on the first, second, fifth time even. It's best if you then go take your child and go, if you can. I know when we're working or having to finish dinner or do other things, it's really difficult, but go engage with your child in another activity to get them off the screen at that point in time. That's a really good way to do it without even giving them a reason. Just like, hey, screen time's over. And this is where the family plan can help, because then if you set boundaries and definite screen times, then your child knows that it's time to get off. You can even set a timer. Timers work really well, especially with smaller children, as you're teaching them, because they feel empowered by it. So you can say, okay, we're going to set the timer, and when it goes off, then we're going to close the screen and we're going to go outside. Well, maybe not today in Dubai because now it's really hot, but when the timer goes off, then we're going to go do this other activity. We're going to do some art, or we're going to do something else. And then they feel empowered because they're the ones following the timer. They have the responsibility. make a reward table. Like we had red flags and gold stars. Even as adults, we love that. Everybody loves rewards. So put it on their table if you have one for, helping around the house, doing little chores and different things like this, and make screen time just another thing that they get rewarded for.
Yes, I think, yeah, you're right, Pamela. I want to add to that. I think when you speak to your daughter, just always ask her. She's a 6-year-old, so probably you can have a quite good discussion with her. Ask her lots of whys. Why do you think it is? I'm saying no. Why do you think it's not very good if you stay long time on iPad or TV? Get her to answer that herself. Let her think about her day. What is she missing on? If you live in a community and she's missing on some maybe fun play in the park with her friends, or she's missing on going cycling or something like that. It's always get it from their side to say why it's harmful, how she can get lazy after watching iPad for a long time. So yes, please always discuss it with them. It's very reasonable when they come. It comes from the side. It helps a lot. Shall we go to the next question? Okay, so we have Nihal. How do we get the rest of the family on board? For example, grandparents. Yes, grandparents is a very big point because you always say no and they say yes. So
yeah,
that's a good question.
So tricky. Again, every family is different, and I get this question whether it's food, maybe foods that parents don't want their children to have, and the grandparents give it to them, where it's the screen time. And sit down and have a talk with your parents, the grandparents and the children and everyone together. Again, it's about communication, so the child knows that you've told them and that they know, and everyone knows. Bring your timer, whatever it is, show them your plan and say, this is how we would prefer to do things, and we would really appreciate it. And especially if your child's struggling with screen time and certain undesirable behaviors, then that's something you could highlight with the grandparents, maybe when the child's not around, to better explain to them why it's so critical that you would like your child to have less screen time.
I would like to add on that as well. And Nihal, as a nursery manager myself, I receive lots of these comments of parents coming and saying, her aunt said that, or her uncle said that, or my mom advised me to do that. I believe as parents, we are the best people to know about our children and what's best for them. It's not going to harm anyone. It's only going to harm your children. So I think it's really good to sit down and talk to whoever have another opinion that contradicts yours, and tell them why you're doing it. They don't have it's not necessarily that they 100% understand what you're talking about or be convinced, but I think it's the time now where they have to kind of accept what you're telling your children, especially grandparents, and raise them up the way that you like and what's best for them. And you can just talk about nowadays and how we were raised up ourselves, like without technology, almost without technology around us as much as it is these days. So hopefully they can get your point of view, or maybe they can join us in one of like these sessions as well.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, communication and boundaries are so important, and it's very hard to set boundaries when family is insisting or breaking those boundaries. But keep doing what you're doing, and just keep the communication open. Stay calm and just be firm, and make sure your child understands as well.
Okay, so we have Marwa. Is using apps for virtual learning more efficient than learning in real life?
This is a really good question, and we could do a whole presentation about this, a whole session.
A whole 2 years, actually.
Right? Yeah. And actually, the answer is it depends. I don't think we can say that one methodology is more efficient than others. I do know that when we write things down, it activates certain parts of our brain. It stimulates other parts of our brain that a screen does not. However, our children are growing up in a time when there's screens and they're using them. And like I mentioned, what they're going to study in university or what they're going to do in their professional jobs and different things will require a screen. So they will need to be savvy. It can help. I saw it with my son when he was learning math and some of these little fun games where you were learning addition and you'd have to feed the fish with the different balls that go together to add up to be a certain number. And that just really improved his math and response time and knowing things. So that was helpful for him. Sitting with the paper, writing it down was not going to help him and not going to motivate him. And he didn't find it fun because he's a tech savvy kid. I think it depends. It varies from child to child. And as they get older, you'll see there's continued discussion. Online school versus face-to-face school. Which is better, which is not? Both have advantages and disadvantages. And then even as you get older at university, there are people that are teaching doctors who don't have, for example, if they're in a remote area, they don't have access to certain surgical techniques or certain doctors that can teach them how to do things. They're learning this on a screen. So there's very practical examples as to why learning on a screen can be good and can be helpful. It should be part of an overall curriculum that I'm sure Miss Amira can speak more to, but it's not exclusively one or the other. It's how can we use them to complement each other?
100%.
I'll turn it over to you now.
Marwa, I'm not sure how old is your child is, but if I'm talking from an early years perspective, here at our nurseries, we usually introduce learning and education through play. So this is our main goal, learning through play. And that's why we set up our classrooms with role play area, all natural resources, all things related to real life, because we want children to experience real life situations before they actually go into it. If we give them the iPads, we have the iPads, we have the screens, as you can see on my background, but we have a policy for that. It's very limited. But if we want to give it to them, we can. But we know that then we're missing on social interactions. We're missing on sensory play. We're missing on lots of physical education play. So I believe that at early years, play is more important than any screens or any educational applications on iPad. Yes, we can still introduce it. As Pamela just said, it might increase their ability in math or reading or whatsoever you're learning about, but still real life situation is what they're going to teach them. It's experimenting things is science. Science is a big part. Technology also is a big part. We cannot deny it. And that's how we give them the iPads. For example, we have the barcodes now. We can see it, the QR codes. We can see it everywhere in the restaurants, in shops, and everywhere. And we started introducing it in our nurseries, but in an educational way. We want them to be literate about technology, how to use an iPad, how to scan a QR code. But at the same time, what comes from this QR code is what we discuss in a circle time with the children. So use the technology in education to serve the real life situation.
Yeah, and my son, for that math app, like he was 5 years old or so he was not so young. The nursery years, there was no technology really, and it was also through play,
100%.
and they benefited. And play is so important because why? It stimulates creativity. Who invented all of these apps and games? Very creative people. So that part of education is equally important.
Exactly. So don't take it away, but use it in a smart way where it serves the real life play. Get your child to always interact in a real life situation. Get their social skills. Work on the social skills actually. Okay, next question. Emil, I know children have different personalities, perceptions, self-management skills. So how much time should my son spend on a screen without harming himself? He is 13 years old.
That's a tricky one. My son is 14.
Yeah, you can relate to that.
I can absolutely relate to this. And it's extremely hard. And especially sometimes I'm working from home and I can't constantly be supervising what's happening. I would say right now, it probably depends on how much screen time your child's having at age 13. If you'd like to decrease it, then start doing that slowly. But it comes down to setting boundaries finish it at a specific time. Those things that I said that apply to small children also apply to older children as well. Cut it off an hour before bedtime. Set limited time. maybe that's 2 hours on the weekend, or maybe more, or maybe, you say, hey, you can have 4 hours of screen time over the weekend. You can use it all in one go, or you can split it up between 2 days. At 13, they really need to feel like they're in control. And it's very hard to get them off when you ask them. But what you can also do, then you need to find what is important for them. What is their currency, dare I say, that when it comes to negotiation, we all know that teens are really good at it. So you have to find what will motivate them to, one, get off the screen, to go do other things. And what is that currency for them? Like, hey, this is the screen time. And if you're going to continue and not follow the boundaries or the rules, there will be consequences. And the consequences need to be meaningful for them. If you're going to ground them from something that they don't care about, then they'll just continue, and ignore it. So again, there's really no right or wrong when it comes to teens. Of course, you don't want them on 8 hours a day, but start with something that's reasonable for you and your family. Like I said, maybe it's 4 hours, maybe it's less, 2 hours. Get your child involved in it. Ask them what they think is reasonable. Ask your 13-year-old, what did your school tell you is reasonable? Because all the schools, for the most part, have talked about responsibility and responsible screen time use, and get them involved. And then when your child says, okay, I think this is a good amount of time, hold them to it, set a timer, and you also have to stick to it and be consistent as well, even when they're resisting to get off after your agreed time, because they might resist at 13. I hope that answered the question.
I like that, giving them the chance to decide on how much is enough for them, and then being accountable to what they have said. I haven't been to that age yet. My eldest is 8 years, but I think this is really going to work and help.
It's hard. And they sorry to, before we go to the next question, and again, because they use it for socialization. Like I said, the night I came home and my son was having such a wonderful time, and it was time to close the screen, but I didn't. And they get a lot of FOMO, fear of missing out. They want to be with their friends, but you'll find, and just keep talking to them about it. The other thing you can also do, ask them to teach you how to play the games that they're playing. Get involved in their world so you understand it. Then it becomes something you can communicate about, and then you can more easily encourage them to get off the screen, move on to other things. But set the time, make sure that you're not taking away their only social outlet. Try to find other social outlets, organize meetups with friends that are face-to-face. That also helps too. If everyone else is on the screen, then it's almost like a punishment if they can't be there. So you have to find that balance as well.
Yeah, it's true, I think. And chatting with them about what kind of games or what are they watching on the screen is really helpful. I do it with my 8 years old. I always tell her, like, come, I have like 15 minutes free. Let me play with you. Do you have 2 players in this game or whatsoever? And she becomes very happy. It's like, yes, yeah. So I think it's very essential to share with them what they're doing. Mm-hmm. Okay, next question. So we have Victoria. Which devices are more or less safe for a baby's eyes? Thanks. Thanks, Victoria. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think she means like TV or iPad or,
Yeah. I assume that you're referring to maybe 24 months and below. And I would say really baby's eyes are still developing. So I would avoid devices for a baby. If you're speaking to a loved one in another country or having a Zoom call with family or something like this, then them sitting on your lap to interact is okay. But you don't want the baby having an iPad because their eyes are still developing, they're still growing. And then also this can create like a really too much early exposure can create a screen addiction for them. So you also don't want that either. So I would say try to avoid screens until after 2 years old or 3 years old. And, you may even continue to do it longer. Get them engaged in other things. Babies need to develop motor skills. They need to develop hand-eye coordination, and those things don't develop on a screen.
Yes, 100%. I agree. I think let your baby spend more time interacting in real life. Babies don't know what a screen is, so let's not introduce it. It's going to come anyway, so don't rush
Yeah,
it.
yeah, that's true. That's true.
Even if it's less safe or more safe, I think, yeah, just limit it to if you're holding your mobile and carrying the baby. Yes, that's okay if his eye or her eyes falls on the screen, but don't introduce it now. It will come.
Oh, yes.
So we have Alia. What is the best way to manage screen time and avoid tantrums?
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a tough one because you can't avoid tantrums. I just want to say tantrums are going to happen, whether it's about screen time or maybe another topic. Tantrums happen, and that's okay. If it's excessive tantrums, then that's a different issue. But we're, as parents, sometimes I would tell my son, like, my job is to be your parent. It's not always to make you happy. Unfortunately, you may not always agree with the boundaries that I set, but it is what it is. So in managing screen time, if you want to decrease it, then you can do that slowly. This is where having the family plan and the communication comes in really well. Sit down, make the plan together. You could say to your daughter, I don't know if it's your daughter or your son, Alia, like, hey, before the screen time either gets out of control, or maybe out of control is not the best way to phrase it, but I see you've been using more screen time lately. Maybe we need to look at doing some other things. What are some other activities that we can do instead of screen time? And again, it's about finding those activities your child enjoys. When it's time to finish the screen time, and maybe you've used a timer like we talked about earlier, take your child from the screen and get them engaged in the next activity. And if it's an activity they love or something that's interesting and new, they're not likely going to have a tantrum. They're going to be curious about the new thing that you're showing them, or the other thing that they love to do. Or like, hey, now it's time to go outside and play, or now it's time to, help me with this or that. So it's about having a schedule and boundaries and really sticking to it. And the best way to do that is with a plan. Get them involved at age appropriate levels. They may not know if they're so small. And sometimes they still may not be very happy about it. But that's okay. That time will pass. It's a very short instance in time. And you would deal with the tantrum in the same way that you would deal with other tantrums. If you give them the screen when they're having the tantrum, then you're always going to have to do that. And then they'll understand that if they have a tantrum, they'll get a screen. And that's you want to avoid.
Yeah. I believe, Alia, when you're talking about tantrums, that's a little child, maybe you don't have a chance to have a conversation with them. If that's the case, I think distraction, Pamela mentioned that earlier in the discussion, distraction is your best solution. Distract them, get to see what they like to do apart from screens, and get them distracted with something. Of course, not candy, of course, not something else that is not healthy, but yes, distract them with a toy or with a nice game or time to share together as a mom and a daughter, or a mom and a son. Drone, how long should a 9 and 11-year-old play Roblox? What are the signs of a screen addiction? Yeah, Roblox is a big part of all our lives. Yeah.
Roblox is Roblox is a big thing. And I think my son just kind of missed that wave. So we didn't have Roblox addiction, but we had other things. So again, it depends on the age, and these age guidelines that we talked about. For 6 years and older, encourage healthy habits. So you can have a conversation. What does your child think is a good screen time? And you probably, as a parent, you have something in your mind before you sit down and talk to them. And if they say, oh, maybe 6 hours, then you want to negotiate it down and say, well, why don't we start with 4 hours? Let's say if they have been playing 6 hours, negotiate it down to 4 hours. You still might feel that's too much. Maybe might be too difficult to go from 6 hours to 2 hours. Start with 4 hours. And then after some time, get them interested in other things and other activities so that you can decrease it to less. But I can't really say that, this many hours of Roblox is best. because again, it really depends on how much they're playing now and how much you want them to play in the future. Screen addiction. So some signs will be losing interest in other activities, if they'd rather spend time doing that than playing outside or participating in sports that they love. If they're using it as a mood booster, and we do know, like I said, it's social for them, but if they're doing it socially, that's one thing, and that's probably okay as long as it's a healthy social interaction. If they're doing it alone and withdrawing, again, and using that as the mood booster, then that can be a red flag. Or, you know, it brings them happiness to be alone, and then that's what they're doing. Because what we don't want, any addiction, whether it's food or a substance or something else, people become addicted to it because they're avoiding a feeling. And just as we want to feel happy in life, we do feel sad, we do feel anger, and we feel these other things. So we don't want to use the screen as something like, the word pacifier came up, we think of small children, but it can be for any age. So we don't want the screen to be the way of dealing with that feeling. So that's another sign of addiction, if they're avoiding feelings through a screen. If they are lying or if they're sneaky about it, that's a sign of addiction. Like sometimes, you know, after lights out, maybe they'll, you know, go back to it. And if you find that it's interfering with relationships, or if their behavior's changed. And if it's a really severe case of any of those, then I would suggest to speak to their doctor or a psychologist to help you find some strategies to deal with it, and to also really speak to the child to get a deeper understanding of what's going on, because maybe it's something else. Maybe it's not just about the screen.
Thank you, Pamela. So the next question, please. So we have Amy. What advice would you give for working parents working from home who use devices to entertain whilst they work? I think it's almost all of us does that, Pamela.
Yeah. Yeah. Hi,
Nowadays.
Amy. I empathize with you. What I would say is give yourself a lot of grace. Working from home and raising children and doing all the things is not easy. And it's never going to look perfect, where all of these guidelines that I've just talked about, where child's on the screen for 2 hours and they're done and they're out playing and you're working. And so don't look for perfection, just look for progress. Always progress, not perfection. Set clear goals and boundaries around it. Anytime you're juggling a lot of things, just as we block time in our calendar with work things, for children, do the same thing. Give yourself time when you can have a break to go down and interact with your child. Hopefully you can do that when you're working from home, even if it's 5-15 minutes, go see what they're working on. That can give you time to get them to disengage from a screen and get onto other things. They may still go back and get on the screen while you're in a meeting, and that will happen because they're kids and that's what they do. And I'm sure they're still going to, you know, grow up and be really lovely people and be very productive. But just keep role modeling, keep boundaries, keep a family plan. When maybe set, and within that family plan, you can say, you know, when I'm working, this is what needs to happen. And again, build rewards around it, whatever the age. If they're small, it's stickers. If they're older, it you know, can be something else. But create a system that works where everybody is on board with it, and stick to that system. As working parents and working from home, we can get really tired and not be consistent with the boundaries we set, because some days our heads are just full and we can't deal with it. We're like, I'm done. I know I'm like that. But we have to be consistent, as challenging as it is.
Just one thing to add to you, Pamela. We're all in the same place, Amy, so it's fine, even if if you don't give them the screen, or if you don't entertain them with iPads or something. we've all been there. So if they come next to you asking you a question or keep nagging in a meeting or something, I think it's okay, because we all in the same situation. So I'm sure that people will understand that. So as Pamela said, maybe time management with planning, and have enough time on screen, but also enough time playing and having planned activities would be very helpful.
Yeah, I welcome kids to join my company's conference calls. If they come in, we're all working moms, and if a small child walks in, they're like, at first it was like, oh, so sorry. I'm like, no, bring them in, let them sit down, bring their screen. We'll talk to them a little bit, let them listen. They get bored and then they go on. And I hope that your boss is the same, because that actually builds a lot of strong bonds when working with people in this kind of virtual Zoom environment that we have now.
Yes, true. Yes, we should all be like that. Yes. Okay, next question. So we have Katie. At what age can I start taking my child to the cinema?
That's a good question. And I think
Yeah.
it's different for every child. Again, it will depend. Probably around age 3 to 4 they may be able to sit there and watch a short film. But for me, it's about, one, can the child sit and enjoy the film for the length, the duration, without disturbing anybody else around them, because you don't want your child in there running up and down and then everybody is uncomfortable. So to me, that's more of there's the society piece to it as well. And also, in addition to the age, it's what is it that they're going to watch? Because I've seen a lot of small children in some cinemas watching movies that aren't really appropriate. Some cinemas, while there's age categories and different things, but some kids go in and watch things that are not appropriate for their age. So I think there's two things. Can they sit there and enjoy it, and during the duration of the film, and is it age appropriate? But usually around age 3, 4, some people wait till 5. Probably below age 3, they probably won't get a lot out of it, and they're gonna, probably be frustrated to try to sit still for that long. So I would think 3 to 4, 5. I don't know, Amira, what are your thoughts on that?
I think you're right. I would treat them as babies who doesn't know what technology and devices are. So I think they still, they hear about cinemas from their friends, but delay it as much as you can, and until you make sure that they are 100% ready to go and watch a full movie and not distracting the society, as you just said. Okay, next question. So we have Sarah. What gadget has the least harm on children? TV, iPad, or mobile? And is allowing my child to watch TV is as equal to watching on iPad or on mobile phone?
I think it depends, because it depends on what they're doing with the device. TV, iPad, mobile, they're all methods of watching something or entertaining, or they can be educational as well. So it depends on what they're doing on it, what they're watching, how they're interacting with it. TV isn't social. TV is one way, but maybe they're watching something educational. iPad, there can be apps. They can be educational or not. Same with mobiles, or they can be interacting with family or talking to somebody. With the iPad and the mobile, we don't want it up close in their face because eyes are developing and things like that. So there's not really a good and bad. It's all very gray.
Yes, I think it depends on what they're watching, what they're doing, the distance, as just Pamela said. So, yeah. Okay, so we have Paul. What is the recommended distance that should be between a child and a device when watching? Okay, so this is what you were just saying, Pamela. So,
yeah, recommended distance. I think I read once by one of the ophthalmology associations for the doctors of the eye, American Ophthalmology Association, I think it was. It should be, in American standards, about a foot away. So if you have a laptop, think about the size of a standard laptop screen, the width of that's about, you don't want it closer than that. So if you're looking at a laptop, that's about the distance. The left side, think of it as your child's face. The right side would be where the device is. If it's too far, of course, they're not going to be able to see it, but we don't want it like just so close that it's a few centimeters away. That's not healthy for developing eyes. And again, you want to take breaks every so often, especially with smaller children, even more frequent breaks. And even as adults, we need to take a break. We need to look away, like something far away, like 20 feet away. So several meters away, so that our eyes use both the short and long distance, because working all of those muscles in the eyes are super important.
And I think we need to keep reminding our children, especially when it comes to the TV with the big screens. I remember my child would always go and stand straight in front of the screen, and I would keep telling her, come back, come back. So yes, I think it's also to do with that, because they will, even if it's an iPad, they will bring it closer to them. But yeah, keep consistency in that as well. Okay, any more questions? Fatima, my 2.5 years old has this habit of eating in front of TV or iPad. How can I stop this habit? Yeah, I think we've all been there as well.
Yes. Yeah, there's a time and a place for that, but that should not be the norm. That should be like really special kind of occasion. First of all, you can do it. There's two ways. You could do it gradually, or you can just say, that's it, no more. So it's up to you. One might seem easier than the other, or it may depend on your child. If you're going to do it gradually, then change the amount of time that they're allowed to have it. So either probably at the beginning of the meal, you can say, okay, get them engaged, discussing something else, doing something else, or set a timer and say, hey, after this timer, then you can have the iPad. So start with a few minutes and then gradually build on that. You can't give in though. You got to be consistent with it. See if it works. And it might be really difficult in the beginning. They might resist, they might cry, they're not going to be really happy, especially if they're really addicted to it and this is their norm and every day. The other thing that you can also do to get them engaged in the food and not in the screen is focus on the food. Put out healthy food, but healthy things that they love. Don't distract them with junk food, but maybe, going screen free, say, hey, let's like celebrate this and we're going to do this, right? Or maybe you build the screen time up to when they have a full meal without the screen. And then when they get there, then that's like a reason to celebrate. Or you can celebrate certain milestones and small steps on the way. The other thing, if you want to go completely cut it short and go like, just cut it out and put your foot down and say no more, then if they're young, you want to make sure that or older even, hide all the screens so that nobody knows where they are. Do it long before mealtime. And it may just be the case of like your child's like, where's my screen? And be like, I don't know. And then just maybe don't mention anything else about it. They might not be so persistent and maybe they'll be okay without it. If not, maybe then they'll start looking and, keep looking and maybe they'll refuse. You can keep them entertained in other ways. You can play music while you're eating. Some people might bring another toy to the table to keep them distracted. That could be a puzzle or something small that just keeps them busy, and it's not a screen. And then eventually that other toy, they're going to outgrow or get bored with it. With the screen, with an iPad or tablet, you always have all these apps and there's always new apps and new things. So that's never ending. That's like to infinity. But if it's a toy, then eventually they're going to kind of lose interest. Be consistent and keep rewarding the behavior that you want to see. But do know that it may not be easy in the beginning. It might feel hard, but you want to be so consistent with that.
Yes, 100%, I agree. And we go back to distracting. If it's a 2.5 years old, I think they can be easily distracted. As Pamela said, maybe with singing while playing or giving them a favorite toy or peekaboo or something like that, it might help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the other thing that I can say about that is don't let them manipulate you. If they say, hey, I'm not going to eat unless you give me my tablet.
It needs lots of consistency from the parents.
Yeah, a lot of consistency. I have witnessed that. And if you give them the tablet in that moment, that's going to set it back. Then say, okay, that's okay. Then maybe right now you're not hungry. So don't force them to eat at that moment. They'll come back when they're hungry.
Yes, true. Okay, so we have Rashna. Please, can you share the impact of a screen time that occurred during the lockdown, and is there any way of corrections?
The impact of screen time, is there any way? Yeah, I see what you mean. Like a lot of our children, they were on the screen all the time, and my son included, because that was the way he could connect with his friends when he couldn't see them and they were social. So as far as correcting, so I think probably I would ask, like, which part of the screen relationship are, is it now they are not coming off of the screen is what I'm assuming you're asking, because they were on the screen for so long. I think what you can do is say, okay, now that we're no longer in lockdown, we're going to review our screen time as a family and look at it as a family plan, not just your kids. As adults, people were watching Netflix all day long. That was like all the talk of everyone in social media for adults, is like what to watch. People were streaming and binging and staying up late and developed unhealthy habits. People have their phones at the tables, like as adults. So I think look at it overall as a whole, not just at the child, and figure out what unhealthy habits did we pick up during lockdown. And it may not just be related to screen. Some other unhealthy habits may be like the times that we eat, or snacking too much, or maybe not exercising enough. So maybe you want to approach it as an overall family health plan rather than just focusing so much on the screen. And then your child might be a little bit more accepting of it. If they're smaller, then some of these tricks and things, like if it's eating with the screen, what I just discussed, different ways that you can maybe break the habit, but definitely having a plan, setting boundaries, specifying how many hours a day on weekdays versus weekends, make it different, and what's allowed, and then stick to that and put a reward system around it.
Thank you, Pamela. And I think this is our last question. Whenever I ask my son from Mahitab, whenever I ask my son 8 years old to stop watching iPad or game, he says, okay, so play with me. And mostly I'm busy, so I don't know how to control on guide plays. Yes.
That's so sweet. Yeah, that's so hard. And I get it, because like, just yesterday, my son's like, Mom, can you come here? And I'm like, I really have to go to this meeting. And it's heartbreaking, because and as working parents and moms, we feel guilty. We want to be in both places at once, and we can't do that. So I think for children, if you can't do it at that moment, then I would just say, I'm so sorry, I cannot come right now, but at this time I will be there to play with you. So as long as they know that they have your support, and you're busy, because it's okay. They need to learn that we're not always available at their disposal, but you can set a time when you will be free. And then that is when he will have your undivided attention, and you guys will play whatever he wants to play.
Yes, please, Mahitab, like always, give him a promise. Yes, we've all been there. We've all gone through this situation. So the time management again, and tell him, okay, at 6 o'clock, I'm done with my meetings, and I promise we will play together, for example, from 6 to 7, just before your dinner and sleep time, and stick to it. He will trust you more, and he will wait for that time, because they really enjoy spending time with us. So yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah, they do. One thing that I do with my son too, in addition to play, is like we'll go, sometimes when I pick him up from school, then we'll sit down and we'll have a snack together, and we'll talk about the day, and then they feel heard, and it's just such a lovely thing to do. So that's another thing you can do as well.
Yes, 100%. Okay, well, I think we're coming to the end of our session today. I hope we answered all of your questions. We have done lots of great talking, discussed lots of valid points and real life scenarios, I think. So it was a great opportunity to have Pamela with us today, talking us through different ways of how to build family screen time plan, which was very helpful, even for myself. I think I'm going to take some tips back home with me. When should we say no? This is a red flag, and we take an action immediately. And of course, when do we need to say, okay, now I deserve a gold start. I have been doing well with my children, and everything is under control. So thank you, Pamela. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed all the valuable suggestions you have shared with us, and thanks for sharing your knowledge. I
Thank you
hope that
so
everyone
much.
out, yes, thank you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, thank you.
I hope that everyone out there enjoyed the session as well as much as I did. Pamela, would you like to give your last words? Would you like to say something before we end the session?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much to Jumeirah International Nurseries, and thank you, Urban Circle, for reaching out to me to collaborate with you all to do this Tricky Thursday. It was really lovely to speak with you, Amira, and thank you for all your questions. And I hope that all of our children, grow up to live wonderful lives, very balanced with screen time. But please always remember progress, not perfection. And you'll see, don't forget to also, as parents, stop and, when you look at screen time or something that you're managing, look at where they were 6 months ago or a year ago and how they were managing it, or maybe struggling with something, because change happens slowly and sometimes we forget and we don't realize it. So as parents, also give yourself gold stars, not just your children, because I'm sure you're going to do a great job. Thank you all so much.
Yes, one step at a time. Thank you so much. Thanks, Pamela, and thanks for all our listeners. Thanks for Urban Circle being part of this as well. You have been with me, Amira Salem, the nursery manager of Jumeirah International Nurseries in Merdif, and Pamela Durant, a certified and wellness lifestyle medicine coaching. Looking forward to seeing you all the next Tricky Thursday, and stay safe and goodbye. Thank you.
Bye. Take care.